Welcome to empowerME Conversations, a podcast from the Atlantic Council. This show brings you leaders from business and government shaping the future of Middle East economies. I'm your host, Amjad Ahmad, Chairman of the empowerME Initiative. Let's get started. Palestine's entrepreneurship ecosystem is unique, to put it mildly. A small, stagnant economy strangled by Israel's military occupation, with restrictions by Israel on trade, movement, and access, and with limited resources and declining aid, somehow it finds a way to survive. With a high literacy rate of 97%, Palestinians have proven to be exceptionally resilient and resourceful as they innovate in critical sectors such as healthcare, education, agriculture, energy, banking, and technology. I am delighted to have His Excellency Osama Al Saadawi, Palestine's Minister of State for Entrepreneurship and Empowerment. A trained engineer, he has extensive experience in managing non-governmental organizations and previously worked as a general director for the Palestinian Housing Council in the Gaza Strip. Thank you for joining us, Your Excellency. I'm also joined by special guest co-host Ibtikar Fund Managing General Partner Habib Hazzan. Ibtikar is a venture capital fund supporting Palestinian founders in Palestine and the region. Habib has over 20 years of experience and has worked at IBM, PwC, Adam Smith International, and McKinsey. Welcome, Habib. Okay, so Your Excellency, we want to give the audience a feel of what you're facing. It's a very unique situation, very unique economy. Why don't you give us a brief about what entrepreneurs see day to day in the Palestine?
Okay, you already, Amjad mentioned some constraints we are facing, and it's increasing day by day now. The authority of the occupation is putting many pressure on Palestinians, and it's increasing actually in a dramatic shape. The burdens over the Palestinian economy. First, we don't have access to our natural resources because Israel is utilizing the natural resources to its benefit and preventing us from utilizing around 42% of the resources of the West Bank, that is called so-called Area C, according to Oslo. In addition, we have the burdens of the Protocol of Paris. It was designed at the time that Palestinians were around 2 million and a half people, and it was supposed to be a transient period for 5 years and then have to be changed. Despite it continues with additional constraints on it. So we are really in a very unique situation. We are still relying here in the West Bank mainly on the Israel and Gaza as well. In terms of power, we are relying on Israeli networks. So up to this moment, mainly, we are doing some efforts here and there, but still the main source is Israeli network, and it's fully controlled by Israel. Sometimes we have many problems. They are cutting here, putting it off here and here. In addition, let's say in terms what affects the people life is the movement, the movement from inside and outside to Palestine. We have many constraints in this regard. Gaza Strip, for instance, is completely blocked, and you find young men with an age of 20 or 25 years who did not get outside of Gaza never even a single time, and it seems that he will not have the chance to. Because there's real restriction in movement. So the Gaza Strip have its own situation, which is very hard and very harsh, really. The unemployment or people under poverty line, according to the recent statistics, exceeds 80%. Around 82% are relying on aid. They need aid for food in Gaza Strip. We have here in Gaza a very significant human capital who are not being utilized. We have many graduates and they don't find even a single job for even temporary job, despite some efforts exerted by donors to relief to make the life more resilient, but it is still there's a lot of to do. In terms of let's say the technology, we are still under the restrictions of Israel as well. We are using so far 3G technology in the West Bank and 2G. And in Gaza, this burden is a real burden. When you talk about digital transformation, how to do it with 2G, it's almost impossible. So yeah, this is the main picture. In terms of entrepreneurship, it is historically, let's say, social entrepreneurship is very familiar in Palestine. It started earlier during the occupation because we have like something like a shadow government during the occupation time that was the NGOs and civil societies in Palestine. So the culture of volunteerism was very spread and very common in Palestine. Now it's being a little bit behind because there is a general body or the government is responsible. And when you find the government that is taking care of things, the spirit of volunteerism will be slowed down. Now we have many workshops actually in Palestine, in the West Bank, in Gaza, and of course with the whole stakeholders, and to discuss about entrepreneurship. Is it a choice or is it a must? Due to these burdens, we are still suffering day by day, and the economical constraints are very huge. So at least we can utilize this window to create more better jobs, more decent jobs for youth, and make little jumps in terms of the growth of entrepreneurship that will, at the end of the day, resulted in commercial impact on the Palestinian economy. So we have to follow this track. Maybe that's why the Ministry of Entrepreneurship and Empowerment was created. That is the main focus. We have many interventions here and there, and a lot of players. We have, nowadays we have around 133 startups in Palestine, and the enablers are something in around 96. Habib, correct me if I'm wrong. Around 96. Some of them significant, some of them a little bit humble, but at the end of the day, we have something to rely on. The main rule we say for the ministry is how to integrate these efforts and how to align the whole resources into a main stream to create the ecosystem and make it very clear and convince the private sector that we have an investment environment in Palestine that will be of success.
So let's start with the entrepreneurs. Given all these constraints that you have and your unique situation, are most of these entrepreneurs building businesses solving very local problems? Because it sounds to me like scaling is very challenging, unless I'm mistaken. But please, I'd love to hear from you about that.
You tackled a very important point, and that we are very much aware of it. The problem here, as I said, there is a restriction of movements. So the youth here in Palestine are not exposed. They don't have enough exposure to the outside business environments. So even when we call for ideas, any institution finds some problems with ideas. They are not, a lot of people cannot create new ideas that could be scaled up and that could be utilized at the global scale. They always look at the Palestinian market, taking into consideration that our Palestinian market is a little bit humble or very much humble. Our GDP is 15 billion, and that's it, the whole story. So it cannot make a boom in this business. And you are correct about this answer. we are really looking after how to make such sort of exposure that our entrepreneurs can go outside of Palestine. And what is the need to do that? We are in a process of doing this.
Yeah, if I may, Your Excellency, I think what recently in the last 2 or 3 years, the enablers, the ministry, the private sector, and even the startups are starting to realize that in order to get funding and in order to scale and in order to be sustainable, they need to look at outside the Palestinian market, and that's kind of like the common theme that has evolved recently. Is that a statement that you agree with? That
Totally, I totally agree with this statement because, as I said, the local market cannot induce such opportunities, and they are really what's happening. There is a lot of replication. Most of the ideas here in marketing or etc. Some services.
So, Your Excellency, then how do you achieve that? Given all the restrictions, and obviously you don't control your own destiny in a lot of ways, how do you achieve that? How do you create that integration with other markets today?
First, we started locally with the enablers, and we are in a process of aligning all the resources into a mainstream. In the last year, we created the cluster that was composed of around 28 enablers. We started with the big enablers, let's say, or the significant enablers in the Palestinian market. They were not talking to each other, and we found some problems among each other, some sort of toxic competition, let's say, exactly. And now we created this cluster to have some sort of interagencies coordination mechanism, so that we agreed together with them upon seven main priorities of intervention that have to be done, and all efforts have to fit in these efforts. One of them is the exposure of our youth outside Palestine. Second, we agreed also upon national KPIs, because each institution has its own KPI. Sometimes it depends on the donor. So our national homework, it's almost fulfilled at the level of the enablers. We have now the cluster. We are frequently having a meeting. We will develop a website that will, for the time being, acts as a window for the ecosystem, Palestinian ecosystem, so that the youth can find access to everything through this website. It will serve as a tool, actually, in their hands, rather than it's a ministerial website. It's for the Palestinian ecosystem website. So we started with this issue. Nowadays, as you mentioned, Habib, everyone is convinced that solutions, most of them comes from outside, either to bring people from outside to Palestine or to go outside. So it will be, this concept is now reflected in many programs at the level of the institutions or the enablers. As a ministry, we have our plans now. We until this moment we have some or great, let's say, financial restrictions, because you know the story of the Palestinian budget. We are in emergency now, state in terms of finance now. But we are promised. We have sincere pledges now around from four agencies to be a part of it, and we have the five main pillars of the ecosystem. One of them is entrepreneurs, the youth themselves. They are in the heart of the business. We want to make sure that they have proper skills, and they have skill knowledge and the exposure as well. As a ministry, we were committed to submit frequently people from the youth outside Palestine to the international occasions, even to the Silicon Valley. We have some communications, and we are expecting to proceed in a very short of time, how to make them aware of what's going outside, how to avail mentors from outside who are aware of the characteristics of the outer external markets or the global markets. That's really in our heart now as a ministry. They are the main focus. Other areas of interventions, we are now designing programs to tackle each component of the Palestinian ecosystem, whether, let's say, at the legislative level. We are committed in the cabinet for the year 2022 to submit the Startup Act law. Because we have recently the Palestinian companies law, which is very modern and very advanced really, but it did not address the entrepreneurship or the startup needs. And it was agreed between myself and the Minister of National Economy that this is a separate issue that should be maintained within our ministry, because we know what are the needs for youth. And now we were promised to have some resources, because we advertised once and twice. And to be honest, we need the global expertise, not the local expertise, to have a law that can attract people from outside Palestine to come here. And we are committed to submit the law by the end of this year 2022 to the cabinet. Of course, after the consultation and with full community participation from all stakeholders.
I think, if I might just add, as an observer as well and the participant for what the ministry has been doing and the enablers, I think it was identified by the many stakeholders here that the key word is access. And I think Your Highness, Your Excellency has used this word repeatedly now in this part of the conversation: access, access, access. And I think it is one of the things that have been severed by the Israeli occupation. Like, we have been, as Palestinians, severed access to our natural market, which is Arab world and MENA area. We have been severed from the Palestinian diaspora with all kinds of entry limitation on Palestinians who have this document or that document, a Hawiyya or not a Hawiyya, this passport or not passport. Even citizens of the US, for example, who can enter Israel freely without a visa. If they're coming to the West Bank and if they're coming to Gaza, then it's a total different story. So to work around all of these things, I think the best thing identified by the ministry and by the many other enablers is to give basically the entrepreneurs who can be creative with ideas the ability to come up with ideas that don't have to wait until all these restrictions are removed. So you have the resilience, resolve of the Palestinian people and the ingenuity in terms of a lot of ideas to kind of like think in very creative ways on how to scale up their companies and how to solve problems even without waiting for like the liberation and for establishing the state. So we see a lot of creativity here that you don't see in other markets. You see a lot of creativity here in terms of working remotely, which were there before COVID, and now after COVID it became something that is global. But we had our own restrictions and our own curfews and our own lockdowns that many people around the world experienced since '67. So we are veterans in dealing with lockdowns and curfews. So I think this has proven as a resolve and of the Palestinian people, and everybody is realizing that in our ecosystem, and the ministry is realizing that and is working in order to provide that access, that missing access part.
And how is the funding seen in Palestine? Are funds available for the startups, or is it challenging, giving again the story that they have very difficulty scaling? How do you see the financing? And Habib, maybe you can chime in as well, because you've obviously raised a venture capital fund. How do you see it play out?
So, Your Excellency, if you want to take it, and then I
No,
might
I'll
add
start with
on.
you. You are a specialist in this regard.
Okay.
Then I will come.
So we started with Ibtikar Fund in 2015 with a very small $10 million fund. It's a micro fund, basically, according to international definitions. And at that point of time, we were doing the job of angels, accelerators, and VC funds, all in the early stage. Since that point of time, we can see an evolution. Currently, we are raising a fund that is triple the size, 30 million. We did already a first closing of that of $15 million. We're still fundraising the second $15 million, and we have a very promising pipeline. We see already now some angel activity. We see some family and friends investing in startups. We see also entrepreneurs putting on their own resources. While a while back, the fear factor was preventing them from doing that. And we can also see some kind of international organizations working together with the government in order to create programs that fill the gap in terms of acceleration, incubation, and all of that. So we have World Bank programs, for example, providing grants of up to $50,000 for each startups to be investment ready, and giving them an incubation program. We see the private sector also chiming in terms of creating incubation programs. Bank of Palestine Group, for example, has the Intersect Hub. Paltel has Fikra. We have Flow Accelerator. We have UMake and Founders Institute. All of this has been coming recently, and as the minister said, the ministry is working also to coordinate all these efforts, so we don't have duplicates and we don't have everybody running into the same thing, but actually trying to cover many aspects of the ecosystem. Now, with that being said, I think we are still in a need for more funds. I would really love competition. I would really love not to be the only fund operating in Palestine, and to work with other funds and syndicate some deals with other funds. But we're doing it regionally. We have some cooperation with some funds in Jordan. We have some cooperation with some funds in the United Arab Emirates. And that is actually bridging some gaps that we have in the ecosystem. Our startups in Fund 1, for example, have attracted investments from 28 regional or international investors in subsequent rounds to the ones that we've done. So that's 28 new investors investing in Palestine on merit, basically, not on philanthropy and not on kind of like emotional, but actually because the startups were attractive as an investment case.
Right. And Your Excellency, I'm curious, when you talk about access being the primary thing, we see a lot of funding initiatives, for example, going in Congress about supporting Palestinian entrepreneurs. Does the access issue ever come up? Because It sounds to me like financing is not the biggest issue. It's really about access to markets. So throwing money at the problem is not really the solution. Uh, how do they react when you talk about this from the international community side?
يعني I'll first start to talk about our traditional donors.
Yes.
Maybe in the past, let's say 3 years, it was mainly maybe the EU and in other countries like Japan. Okay, so they put some resources in terms of funding for entrepreneurship. The question related to the funding or access to finance, to what limit is the private sector engaged in this business? We are not, let's say, satisfied with what is going on. We have a very clear example, Ibtikar Fund, and they are the most significant example actually in the Palestinian market. But in my turn, I will say that we have first to convince people, because they cannot come in the current situation just for national, let's say, national emotions or etc. They have to see a very clear business environment and very clear enabling environment. So our homework is to develop what sort of regulations, acts, laws have to be in place to convince people to put their money on the table. And second, we are talking to the donors. This is the first. We have the cluster. We have in the near future. We have extensive meeting with startups. 133 startups. In order to understand what are their actual needs, are the services needed for them being delivered in a proper way, even not only because we have some concerns about mentors, about trainers. We want to make sure that they are fit to do their business in the best practice manner. So after we finish with the startups, we'll go back again to the enablers to convey this message. This is what to be done in terms of their mission. Second, we already have debate with the donors, multi donors, and we are trying to align their interventions with our national strategies.
Right.
So that we have some sort of integration of efforts and to avoid the replications, and we are interfering with in many projects now the donors at the design stage. That is what is the most sincere. In addition, we have a decree in the cabinet let's say I raised an issue to have a sector working group. We have 9 sector working groups for other sectors to add a new window for entrepreneurship into how to, because the government is keen about the Palestinian youth. Youth between 18 years old and 29 years now forms around 22% of the overall population. And many of them are highly educated.
Yes.
The problem in this cluster of people who are not educated, the unemployment rate is very much low. But we have problem with the graduates because they don't have the proper job opportunities, and many of them are came from IT background, so they are resources that we can utilize it very fast, at least because now we are in the stage. We have many business in terms of digital transformation, because we cannot have entrepreneurship without the driving force, which is the digital transformation. We are putting a lot of efforts now in terms of e-government, of the e-payment. We have contracts, and we have released as a pilot trial 1 and 2, and it will be within this year We start with the government, citizen, and later on we want to see it expanded among the country. So this is the story. First, we need first to fulfill our homework, and in the same time we need to talk to private sector. After we feel we have some level of confidence with our regulations, with our startups here in Palestine, with enough exposure, then I think money will come, because I saw some studies that what is the contribution of money for the success of startups globally? It does not exceed 24%.
Yes.
The most important, as you said, Amjad, is the concept, the idea, the ecosystem. It is an integrated effort, not only the funding. The funding is significant, but it is not the driving force. I think the driving force is the human capital. If we have very sound human capital with a business enabling environment supported by educational system, which is recent and addresses the market need, I think then we will succeed.
I want to give Habib the opportunity to ask some questions. So please, Habib.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we are, to continue the theme that about the access, I think one of the important factors in our access to other markets is the use or utilization of the Palestinian diaspora. For example, in Fund 2, in Ibtikar Fund 2, we are going to invest a portion of the fund, not a lot, but a portion of the fund in startups that are established by Palestinians in MENA region. And the question is, what do you see as the role of the Palestinian diaspora in strengthening the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Palestine? And this, I think, goes along the lines of the access that we were talking about.
Yes,
as well.
and I think many of them are living within a very sound business environment, have the knowledge, have the expertise, and others maybe have the financial resources to invest in Palestine. So they can have a major role in this regard. And let's say, as an outcome of ICEP 1, 2, 3, and we have some contacts from people in the diaspora. Habib, you know ICEP, what I mean by it, and maybe
ICEP, for those who don't know, is the International Conference on Entrepreneurship in Palestine.
Exactly. So we have contacts with them, and they are ready to help in promoting our business. So I think this will be a major role, and once we have the platform in place, we will invite them to be part of the platform. In addition, we have recently contacts with, let's say, neighbors in the region who have success in terms of entrepreneurship. We will have in the near future, we already had communication with Tunisia. They have a very good ecosystem, and they are ready to assist us in our mission, and they are ready also to open their markets to Palestinian entrepreneurs to make benefit of the ecosystem that is there. Recently as well, I was in Turkey, and we have the same concept, and they are ready now to enable us to use their infrastructures. What is lacking here, something like finance. We can use their infrastructure, and we will conclude together on a plan of action. We are preparing it now, and we will have it in place in the very near future. So that's the story. we have to rely on our brothers, on our friends, on the region. We can find support from countries like Egypt, Jordan as well. They are in the coming day. I can say that now, yani, we have a very clear vision what to be done, and it's communicated with others. Like yani, Habib mentioned it several times. Yes, يعني everyone from the stakeholders of the business enabling environment knows what to be done and how to do it. And I think this is our role mainly to open the road for the private sector as a government. We are not in the ministry. We are not looking to ourselves as implementing agency. We are looking to ourselves as an integration entity, as a coordination, and later monitoring and evaluation. This is the role that we are satisfied with.
Your Excellency, just to push on that issue of talent and um, giving the youth there a little bit more exposure to international best practices and technical expertise. We saw a couple of announcements with regard to Google and AstraZeneca and other things that you've signed for actual training. Is that being implemented, and how useful do you find that when corporates come and set up centers there? And is there a pipeline of others looking to do so?
AstraZeneca had an agreement with Orange Corners, in Jordan first. Orange Corners is active in Palestine, and they have now a huge project with Flow Accelerator in Ramallah. And it's very extensive program indeed, and I think they will benefit from AstraZeneca fund in Jordan to be in a later stage to be here in Ramallah, I think, yes.
Habib, how are you finding the interest from corporates outside in terms of setting up centers and training? And is it robust, or is it just marketing?
So I think it is shifting. Few years ago, it was some lip service for that balance that everybody was looking, because all these multinational corporates were in Tel Aviv or in the neighboring places, and they paid lip service of that balance. But recently, we see that they are recognizing the talent. They are recognizing the global and there's a global shortage of talent, and they are opening R&D and either directly or working through Palestinian outsourcing companies to hire very good engineers. It has been recently even the case that the Israeli government, after years of only restricting Palestinian talent, is piloting a program where they are going to give permits basically to Palestinian engineers to go work directly in Israel. So I guess that kind of like is under the label of I see that Israeli tech cannot be racist anymore, basically cannot afford to be racist anymore. So now, with the global shortage of talent, they are kind of like looking to basically take another resource of ours, which is talent and brains. And it's not for out of human rights or anything like that, but it's just because of the shortage that there is there.
Yeah, well, that's okay. If need drives positivity for the ecosystem, that's fine.
They are in an urgent need of around 5,000.
Okay, interesting. Well, yeah, if the Palestinian engineers can benefit from that, why not, right?
We have to be cautious because
we prefer that these jobs stay in Palestine and they become in Palestine rather than they take the engineers to Tel Aviv. And I think in terms of but eventually the know-how transfer will happen.
That's the key, right?
the exposure to multinational, whether it's direct or through their R&D centers in Israel, is a key comparative advantage to Palestinian tech and Palestinian talent. I don't think any other neighboring country, Jordan or Lebanon, has that kind of exposure. And we utilize that in order to create better startups, better companies, and be more competitive. And that's eventually what matters.
Absolutely, absolutely. So to end on a high note, what has worked in terms of investment? So you mentioned, Your Excellency, sectors that you're focusing on. If you were to talk to a room of investors today, what has worked? What sectors do you think make sense for the environment that you're in? And Habib, maybe you can chime in as well, since you've already invested. What are some of those sectors that have worked in Palestine?
Yeah, see, at the local level, maybe agriculture have a good share, even in startups and in innovation. We are actually looking on, we have a shared common vision with the Prime Minister himself. And he's looking at Palestine, and we are trying to make a branding in terms of IT. That Palestine is have its own brand in terms of information technology, because we have a lot of graduates in Palestine. We have the youth cluster, as I said, around 22%. And we started the Palestinian Coding Academy to reorient the skills of youth, and we have a very successful example actually. We have two cohorts that graduated from around 129 youth. They found job immediately after graduation, and at a very significant scale, not at local scale. And we will continue in this regard, and continue this program and to extend it actually in the same manner as the cohort 1 and 2, and we are in the ministry designing new programs for this sort of program. But we will make use of the IT graduates to make the effort very much less. If we take the IT graduates, it's very simple to enhance and upskill them. But when we talk about people from backgrounds like us, etc., who were included in cohort 1 and 2, it was really a successful example, but it was very expensive to us as a government, and we only requested each candidate to share less than 10% of the cost of the training that was for a month, and we will continue this track.
Excellent.
From what I saw, and the investments that are successful, whether it's in our portfolio or other companies that have come out of Palestine, is that companies that have some kind of deep reliance on technology and less e-commerce and similar things. So in our portfolio and in others, we saw very successful companies doing SaaS, for example, serving SMEs in all of the region. We saw a lot of companies that are enabling e-commerce, so supporting the logistics, supporting loyalty, for example, companies like logistics, companies like Gamify, and others that are basically enabling people to do better e-commerce. It's less coming out of Palestine of companies that are B2C, that are brand names, because that's probably needs like a lot of deep pockets and building a lot of brand recognition, and that's kind of like not exactly our sweet spot.
Right. By the way, are you seeing a lot of? I saw some statistics about women entrepreneurs. I think you have very good statistics in terms of women entrepreneurs. Is that correct?
We, I leave it to His Excellency, but I think we are faring better than New York in that. We have a higher percentage of female founders in our fund than in many other funds. We have 40% in our fund of female founders. I think this is a ecosystem in general as well. And I think,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's really a great success. You know, the issue of enabling empowerment of women, the graduates in terms of IT among females is it's higher than in the males. In the males, yeah, in Palestine. In terms of the governmental employees, around 49% of the governmental employees lies in the female, you know. So the government itself يعني is committed, but where is our problem? It's in the private sector, really, because private sectors, you know, the business, the Palestinian business lies in SMEs, small SMEs, and such sort of business, it's actually a family business that put a lot for males, and female cannot benefit in all cases from such business. But I saw some reports recently regarding the female contribution in IT, in outsourcing, because there is no need to be physically presented in the institution. They find it maybe for economical reasons at lower salaries they can utilize females, and they have enough skills and expertise. So the percentage is growing, yes.
Well, you know, I think
But
I
in
think I
terms
think if there's flexibility, it really adds to the women being able to work, and so that flexibility, corporate flexibility, is really important. Um, well, great. Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you, Habib. I really appreciate your feedback. I think our audience has learned a lot. We don't hear a lot about the ecosystem, but hopefully going forward, we can hear from you more. And anything we can do to try to help the ecosystem develop, we'd love to lend a hand. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to Empower Me Conversations and rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. For updates on our work, follow us on LinkedIn and at AC Mideast on Twitter, or visit atlanticcouncil.org.